Hello and welcome to Honey Badger Radio's Circlezerk. Ha! I did
Oh,
it.
okay, you did it. You did it. You
Yes,
did
I
it
did
right.
it. Circlezerk number 56. I apologize if I sound like my brain is sliding off a plate because it sort of is. I took a couple muscle relaxants before this, so it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be fun. It's
The
gonna
brain
be.
is a muscle. People don't realize that before they take those things.
Yeah, well,
I didn't think that it was, but apparently there is some sort of musculature going on in the brain that's now currently sliding off a plate in my brain.
excellent, excellent. That actually, that makes me happy because I also have a headache and am medicating at the moment as we speak. So I won't have to. I'll let you look bad on all of our behalf, and I'll look good compared to you. Just to let everybody know, Circlezerk, no, there have not been 55 of them before this one, but we chose to name the Rantzerker today something a little bit different. Um, it's a subset of Rantzerker that maybe we're going to try out. I don't know, do more of them. Um,
Yeah, it's
but
like it's
They
like
probably should have done that with the miscellaneous reasonings, come to think of it.
yeah, no, yeah. Oh, did we? Okay, let's not get too much into logistics, but yeah.
They have their own shelves now. It's a bit messy over in the reasoning,
Oh,
but that's
shit.
how I like it.
All right, well, Mike, you're mostly in charge of that, and my brain isn't like I feel like it's slowly melting, so I can't really argue.
uh,
It's
and and you know, we know that the muscle relaxants are helping you resist your urge to like rip out your hair over the complete lack of organization, and sort of the all over the place spaghetti that this has already turned into. So, uh,
Yes. Yeah, okay, but no, I mean, like, the idea was that we would change the name, but, it's still basically the same thread, and there's no ranting, there's just gonna be some circle jerking. Zerking, sorry. Circle zerking. As
circles
in,
jerking.
yeah, because I think we all agree to some extent that gynocentrism is a thing. I don't know, is anybody on the panel, like, is anybody not really, didn't take the ticket for the gynocentrism boat? 'Cause, speak up now.
Uh, Totally, gynocentrism does not exist. We live in a patriarchy. It's 100% misogynistic. Women are kept down. They're subordinated. They have no power whatsoever, and the men are all evil scumlords.
Ah, okay. Well, thank you. That's a different boat.
No, no, clearly the women are around the outside. If you go to any species, any civilization, you'll see the first thing you'll see is this wall of women protecting everything. It's
Dead
absurd,
bodies of women.
absurd to say that women are in the center.
It's absurd to say that women are uniquely protected. Yeah, and the thing is that feminism already has a word for gynocentrism. They call it benevolent sexism. And they have observed that benevolent sexism is more likely to maintain sex roles than hostile sexism. For the obvious reason that women would prefer to get a benefit out of, being part of a gender system. In hostile sexism, you don't get really, you just get insulted, right? But with benevolent sexism, there's an element, and I'm just using the term as a term of art because basically benevolent sexism is gynocentrism. With benevolent sexism, there's an element that women are so valuable they can't possibly be risked, and as a man, I have to protect them because of that value. And of course, that's a very seductive thought. And unsurprisingly, feminist research, which while you can question a lot of its conclusions, as long as it's solid in its methodology, and the data is not compromised, you can look at that and draw some interesting conclusions. Like I said, not the same as usually than the feminists do. But when you look at their studies into benevolent gynocentrism, it's unsurprising that women will maintain the sexual roles that, or be enticed to maintain the sexual roles in which they are more valuable and men sacrifice for them. And that seems like a no-brainer. But essentially that's what it is. Feminism calls it benevolent sexism. We call it gynocentrism. Um, and we also like in denying those conclusions that feminists come to, there are lots of things that feminism denies about benevolent sexism, because if feminists and feminism looked really closely at benevolent sexism, they would see themselves looking back.
Agreed, agreed. And I also think that by calling it benevolent sexism, it avoids looking at the ultimate cause of it, right? Like the ultimate reason for it, which is not misogyny. It's not designed to keep women
It's not
subordinated.
hatred of women.
It's not designed to keep women subordinated. It's designed to keep women protected. And in as much as society can protect women while allowing them as much freedom as they want and as much choice as they want and all of that, and they can still be protected, at least in relative terms to, you know, what little protection it gives to men and even children. As long as society can actually provide that protection, right, it will be willing to give women those freedoms and those choices. And we've seen this all through the last century or so, all through the last century and a half, giving women power, giving women freedom, giving women extra, you know, giving women rights without responsibilities, giving women, you know, all of these freedoms to decide what they want to do and decide where they want to go and decide, you know, society is going to be willing to allow women this degree of mobility and choice and freedom and power and all of that stuff, only as long as those women can maintain that society can maintain a level of protection over those women that is superior to the level of protection over men. So it's not that benevolent sexism is designed to keep women subordinated and in their roles. It's because if society can keep women protected without women having to be in those roles, then it'll do it. It'll make it happen, right? So it's really about protection. It's not about subordination. It's not even about division of labor. It's not about any of that. It's about protection.
And where it's not, like, where you can see it going into straying into more darker territory. What it is a dynamic in which you exaggerate women's victimhood in order. It's almost like an extortion racket, and this is where it goes into darker territory. The normal, like, benevolent sexism isn't always like that. It's just, and we'll get into the biological function, but for the most part, it's just a desire for men to protect women. And there's biological underpinnings or maybe social underpinnings that we can change, but probably not as much as we think, or maybe we can change more, whatever. But where it strays into darker territories is when it starts to exaggerate women's victimhood to justify restricting their freedom. And that happens too. Women can be exploited based by gynocentrism.
Well, yeah, but I think at this point, society is really struggling with this desire to give women that protection without restricting their freedom. And so, who are they restricting now? They're placing huge restrictions and expectations on men. You know, like instead of the woman in the hijab going out with a male escort from her family, right, to the market, or having her husband drive her, you know, where she needs to go in Saudi Arabia.
Can I just point out something really quickly? Those are restrictions on men.
Every man is going to fill that role.
Yeah, but it's, in your example, those are still restrictions on men, because the men are obligated to actually fulfill these functions for women and these protection functions for women, even in
women, not for any woman.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So you're going from a situation where a man is expected to fulfill a protective function for the women in his family to a situation where feminists apparently want to compel men to take care of all women, even if they're strangers to them, which is quite the task if you think about it. It's an interesting, but it's still the same attitude. It's the prioritization of the protection of women over necessarily the freedom. I mean, TealDeer recently did a video on a particular situation of a campus a non-rape. I don't know, TealDeer, did you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I think it ties into all of this too.
Well, I can do.
Yeah.
It was an interesting case, and it's one that personifies what we're seeing in modern society around the rape hysteria on college campuses. Um, what we know, and this is something that we've known and you've covered on Honey Badger Radio numerous times before, false rape cases where women have just made shit up, and everyone's descended on the supposed perpetrator, the accused man, with no evidence or very little evidence or just at the word of the woman. And what this case was, this was an interesting case because this was two consenting adults engaging in totally consensual sex. And in this instance, it was a third party who noticed that the woman had a love bite on her neck. And this third person jumped to the conclusion that she was necessarily raped, and the university then expelled the man with basically no trial, not even really getting the police involved, just said, nope, that's it, you're done, because we must virtue signal how much we want to protect women and keep them safe on our campus. And that is the personification of this constant pattern that we observe throughout all of society, that women are the sort of protected and provisioned class in society, or not sort of universally per se, but it is something that all societies lean towards, and it's something that you see a pattern of across economic models, across societal models, across political models. It's something that always happens. It is a human universal, as it were. In the supposedly oppressive Middle Eastern countries, as we've already said here, women are chaperoned everywhere. Their actions are always overseen by that of men, but it's not through a malevolence of the men in the society. It is as a means of protecting the women and ensuring that they are provided for. That's why they have laws in those Middle Eastern countries where it's things like the man is legally obliged to provide his wife and his daughter with whatever it is that they require for the comforts of their life, and that if he fails to do that, she can divorce him or take him to a court, and he will be socially required to provide her with things, and yet there is no social enforcement of that for the woman. Should she take a job operating in her own home, her money is her own, she's under no obligation to give it to anyone. That is a societal provision of protection for the women, even though it is by Western standards a very, very oppressive ideal. And this is why when you talk to women in places like Saudi Arabia, and you can say, well, you're not allowed to drive, don't you find that oppressive? And they say, fuck no, I love being chauffeured everywhere because it makes me feel like a fucking queen. And then you sort of jump over to Western countries where it's a lot more democratic. People are on equal footing, or some more equal than others in the case of women, as they do have several laws that give them objective legal rights that men do not have. And this has come about, again, out of the we want to provide for women, we must provision women, we must give women whatever it is that they want, and we see that this manifests in unfair biases that we see in society. So women, for example, in countries which have a draft, they gain a right to vote without having to go through the sign-up of being willing to be called up and thrown as meat into the machine for whatever war your government has decided to go on this week. It's a constant theme, and again, we see that also manifest in the other things that we see, are women being half as likely to even go to trial if they commit the same crime, getting up to 60% lesser sentences even when they do the same things that men do. This constant denial that we see in society that women are capable of molesting children at higher rates than men, or that they're just as capable of lying about things as men, deceiving, murder, and rape, and all of these sorts of things. It all points to this preferential treatment that women have within the human species, as it were. And the really interesting thing about all of these traits is that they seem to be cyclical, and they seem to be cyclical based on the sort of biological function from where they come from. If you take like a small tribe of people in a really, really exposed and remote location where they are likely to be murdered by anything at any time. You know, they are not the top of the food chain or anything like that. The men will always be the ones doing the dangerous work. They will always be the ones who go out and wrestle bears with their fists and all of that stuff. They'll be the ones who do the heavy lifting. They'll be the ones who build the houses, do the hunting, all of that stuff. The women will have laborious jobs, certainly, but they will not be required to put themselves into the positions of harm. I mean, if you watch any documentaries about these small native tribes in places like Africa or South America, if one of the guys, or if the guys come back with a load of stuff from a foraging expedition, or the women come back with stuff from foraging, because they both forage, but men tend to do the hunting. But if the women find like a root or a tuber or something, and they're like, we don't really know if this is poisonous, well, what we'll do is we'll just mash it up, boil it, and feed it to one of the men, because fuck it, they're kind of disposable, and they have like stronger constitutions. If it kills him, okay, fine, but if it doesn't, great, then we know that it's safe. And that's sort of a necessary arrangement of labor owing to the environment and the sorts of people that you've got there. It's a basic division of labor based on biological differences between men and women. When things get more settled, once that particular group of people has conquered their environment, made everything a lot safer, then you start seeing the demand for equal levels of power within society, but with less requirement attached to it. So in those sorts of situations, you've got
Uh-oh.
Did we just lose TealDeer?
I don't know. We lost his audio. TealDeer!
TealDeer, we've lost your audio. Oh, you might want to... Okay. Oh, and it was really... Like, he was building up to something.
You had this excess power, it's no longer there. It's a moot point. We've conquered whatever it was in the environment. So women's level of power rises in society to become the equal of that of men, and that seems to be a cyclical nature to most empires that have ever existed throughout human history. And if anything, what we see from this cycle, which seems to last about 200 or 300 years, is that at the end of it, everything goes to hell, rather interestingly, when women's level of power rises to be the same as that of men, but without any of the additional social responsibility that goes with it. Possibly owing to the fact that women tend to favor sort of more socialist policies. They tend to be more in favor of things like mass immigration, mass welfare expenditure, all sorts of things like that. It's quite an interesting, very large, interconnected web of nonsense, but that's kind of a very quick way of going through it. So off you go, whoever wants to get something in there.
Yeah, Mike, you spoke up, so let's...
Yes, I watched your last video, and the story in that of a rape being charged by a third party, it makes you wonder about all these stories about how many rapes there are in that faraway developing country, and how many rapes there were a long time ago. Yeah, how many of those are just of the same story, a false rape allegation made by a third party? And
we already know that that's really common.
Yeah, even despite the second and first parties saying it wasn't rape, there comes a point in a regressive regime like that where serving the people becomes less important than punishing them, particularly punishing the men.
Well,
They're just addicted to the witch hunt at that point.
Well, what seems to be the case, like in about 50% of cases in India, is that that 50% of the rapes that get reported to police derive from consensual sex between unmarried people, and sometimes the family of the woman or the family of the man the family of the woman presses rape charges, because they just don't like the fact that this is going on. Sometimes the man promised marriage, but his family won't give him permission, so she brings a rape charge in the with the aim of coercing marriage out of him, coercing permission out of his parents, and sometimes it's essentially, she didn't want to get married and he didn't make any promises, but she got pregnant, or the neighbors are looking at her funny now or whatever, because it's still not very socially acceptable there to have, be promiscuous outside, or have sex outside of marriage or whatever. And so then she has a change of heart and she wants him to marry her, and so she brings a rape charge to coerce that out of him, right? And so essentially, when you look at a case like this university one, which seems to be based on this idea of we're going to protect her from her own decisions, right? And this seems to be, when you go back to like sort of the biblical idea of rape, right? Where you have that verse in whatever the fuck it is, Deuteronomy or whoever, that says, a man who comes across a woman, a virtuous woman, and he rapes her, then he has to pay her father so much money, and then he has to marry her, and he's forbidden from ever divorcing her, right? So essentially, you broke it, you bought it, right? But when you actually look at how rape was defined in that time, right? It was essentially anybody who had sex with a unmarried woman of virtuous status, so an unmarried marriageable woman, was considered to have committed rape, right? So, I mean, even if she crawled up his frickin', onto his dick like frickin' climbing a fire pole, right? Even in that situation, it would still be considered rape, and the only person who's actually being forced by the law to do anything in this circumstance is the rapist, the guy, right? Because he's got to pay her dad and he's got to marry her and he can never divorce her, right? Whereas she's not. There's nothing in that verse that says that her parents have to insist on that, or that she get married, or that she has to get married. None of that really applies. It's just like he has to make an honest woman out of her. So it's essentially like, how did we even define rape back then? Well, it was like, oh, the two kids, they fucked up, they done fucked up, and now we got to run them to the altar with a shotgun, right? I'm sure they defined all kinds of other things as rape too, but it seems like we're having this huge expansion of.
Can I just slip in there, because I want
to encompass all of these other things that used to be involved before women had sexual freedom.
Can I just slip in there, because I want to say that there's several things, just to clarify the context of these laws. These laws were in place where you might see a judge once every 6 months. And what they wanted to have an explanation of, or a deal with, was those situations. What they wanted the judge to deal with were those situations where, exactly as Karen has defined them, the man has had sex or even been forced to have sex. Because I imagine there were some cases where a desirable man, a woman just stealed into his tent, and then he's obligated to marry her at that point. They wanted the law to deal with those cases of forcing men into those situations. And when it was a situation where some guy, grabbed your daughter and had his way with her, that was most likely dealt, and this is what happens in a lot of Middle Eastern places now. That was most likely dealt by killing him and some of his relatives. That was most likely dealt with by basically mob justice or tribal justice. So if it was a genuine rape, they had no interest in this, the judge comes around 6 months, once every 6 months, let's figure out what he or she, because it was she sometimes, judges were sometimes a she, what he or she has to say about this incident. No, you got the men and the horses and the things together, and you went and you ripped that fucker's spleen out. That's how they dealt with it. But when we were dealing with issues of property and inheritance and marriage, they wanted a judge to deal with that. So most likely, the rapes, the honest-to-God rapes, were dealt with at the point of a sword. Whereas he's fucking her and they both like each other, or even, she fucked him and he doesn't really like her, but it's a done deal now. Those were probably dealt with the judge. So, and this never even went into the historical record, because this other form of retributive justice or violence or revenge was entirely tribal, entirely not written down. But we see it today in the Middle East. If a man from one tribe rapes a woman, and even if it is consensual, because sometimes it is, if a man from one tribe rapes, drags her into an alley and rapes her, the woman's tribe will go and hunt him down and kill not just him, but a couple others of his brothers or whatever. I mean, there is still retributive violence when it comes to rape in those cultures, but it doesn't enter the legal system because they don't think it's not necessary, because they're dealing with it on a tribal level, not on a legal level. And that's something that people don't account for when they look at the laws that were written down. These laws that were written down in the Bible, in these historical texts, they dealt with a situation where you don't see a judge but once every 6 months, well, a couple times a year, maybe.
Well, and two, the sort of the definition of rape essentially means taking things that, you know, don't belong to you without, you know, consent, blah blah blah. You know,
they wanted the judge to adjudicate over issues of property.
Yeah.
Issues of morality and issues of you just fucked with our tribe by raping one of our daughters, that was dealt with the sword.
Yeah, and so you sort of look at this idea of, you know, okay, so you have taken something that you had no right to take, right, which is her virtue. And whether you consider that to be, okay, that's considering women to be property. Well, no, not sort of, okay, because essentially a woman's virtue was her most prized piece of property, right? And of course her family would be able to exploit that in matters of inheritance and in matters of making marriages that forged alliances between families and kept the fabric of the community together.
Can I just point out something really quickly? The laws aren't saying that the rapist, the alleged or ravisher, I think would probably be a better term, has to support the woman's family or her father. They're saying that the ravisher has to support her.
Well, yeah, but he has to compensate her father by paying this fine to her father, and he has to do that because, you know, her father might have been able to make a more profitable marriage, a marriage for her that's arranged something that was more profitable to the family, you know, arranged for her to be, you know, get married to a more powerful guy from a more powerful family, at which point now our family has this alliance with this other family, and, you know, and we've got all of these juicy trade deals between each other and all the rest, right? And, you know, what I think people don't realize when they think about that passage in the Bible and they judge it by today's definition of rape, which is a man forcing a woman to have sex, with, you know, or a man having sex with a woman without her consent, right? No. Back in those days, the woman could be like consenting. She could be enthusiastically consenting. She has no right to consent. She has no business consenting, right? And she does not have the right of consent, right? Consent was a signed document and a pledge that you spoke to each other in front of gathered witnesses. That's what that was. It was the marriage ceremony, and that's what consent was for both the man and the woman.
Well, I mean, consent for the man was, I guess, I'm not even sure if it even came into it.
Well, I mean, consent in terms of, yes, I agree to have a sexual relationship with this person.
Well, no, I mean, okay, let's look at it. Let's look at my main point was that when you look at those laws, it doesn't mean when they were asking that once every 6 months judge to adjudicate over a property decision, that doesn't mean they didn't actually were hugely offended if if one of their women was actually raped. But that would have been separate from this jurisprudence. But the thing is that when oh gosh, sorry, the muscle relaxants are screwing me up. If you look at, like, just think about a case, and let's imagine there was a guy who was, you know, let's say much more propertied, a much wealthier, higher status, and he managed to find one day, you know, a smelly peasant on his dick. and her father's like, yeah, you got to marry her now. You know, that's, you know, his the issue of his consent is gone.
True.
You know, and so I don't see anywhere in this where the issue of men's consent is considered. I just wanted to point that out before we move on, because I think the overall point that you're making, Karen, is that system in like Deuteronomy in the Bible is now, we're now seeing the threads of that coming out in this system.
Yeah, no, it's like we're circling back on it.
Yeah, we're getting to the point where we're saying this woman couldn't consent. Like, she literally
doesn't have the right to consent.
She doesn't have the right to consent to sex. She doesn't have the right to have her sexual decisions respected by the system.
Now her virtue doesn't belong to her family, it belongs to the state.
Oh, God. Oh, Mike. Oh, that is so disgustingly creepy. But it's so true.
True. So now the state owns women's virtue, and the state decides when a woman has been raped or not. Not the woman, the state. And this is a fucked up precedent. And it is also based on benevolent sexism. Ladies, if you end up losing your freedoms and your rights, it's not because hostile sexists got bitchy at you. It's because benevolent sexists convinced themselves that they were protecting you. That's where it's going to go. We are now circling the drain, and we are going to go back to Sharia law. That's where we're going. Because this is going to get worse, and it may be even worse, because it won't be your father, your brother, your relative who's deciding on whether or not you consent, whether or not you have a job, what job you can have, your bank account. It's going to be the government, who you have no real you do not have the same direct influence over. Okay, sorry, Mike, go ahead.
It's possible that benevolent sexism is the worst kind of sexism. And it's sort of, it occupies this non-space in our vocabulary, because it's more of a philia than a phobia, benevolent sexism, or gynocentrism, as we sometimes call it, and it's never acknowledged as a kind of bias, as a positive bias. We call people racists for hating other races, but we don't have a word for people who love something too much, except in certain
well, not love it, but love its victimhood.
Yeah, so someone who mollycoddles a particular race, particularly not their own. We don't even have a name for it, let alone stigmatize it.
Yeah, even though by serving their victimhood.
Yeah, even though it does pathologize into something just as destructive as hate, if not more. The soft bigotry of low expectations. We name the dysphoria, but not the euphoria, because it's not euphoria anymore. It just goes the other way and becomes the other kind of dysphoria. In fact, the words we do use to stigmatize gynophilia are words like white knight and mangina. Those words are themselves stigmatized. You'll be more stigmatized for using those slurs than the person you're stigmatizing.
Yeah, and I think that gynocentrism, like, maybe we could discuss the difference between gynocentrism and benevolent sexism as terms. I think gynocentrism captures more why women like this stuff. Why women keep getting suckered into this shit over and over again.
And why it actually exists in the first place. I mean, like, benevolent sexism is an outcome of gynocentrism, right? A hostile sexism against women is also an outcome of gynocentrism, right? Gynocentrism is, like, you look at the two.
Did you just swallow your microphone?
Sorry, you look at the two terms, benevolent and hostile, right? And one of them seems good and the other one seems bad, and it's inherent in the name, the whole bit, right? And there's sort of like moral judgments attached, right? One of them is okay, even if we, have to pretend not to like it, and the other one is like really, really not okay, right? And but you look at something like a blanket term like gynocentrism, which actually explains both sides of this sexism equation, right? And I think that it's just a more solid term. It's a more solid phenomena, because what is benevolent sexism in one environment or one situation or whatever may actually be hostile sexism in another, right? Like if I went to get in my car and a cop stopped me and said, "You're not allowed to drive," right? I'd be like, yeah, you know what? You can lick my butthole, right? That's hostile sexism to me in my situation, right? Whereas a woman in Saudi Arabia, 80% of them apparently feel that that's wonderful, benevolent sexism that they really want to preserve, right? So I think that gynocentrism is just a more useful sort of catch-all for these things that, even when it's the same fucking thing, right? It may be hostile to one person or benevolent to the other, depending on who it's directed at.
Yeah, it doesn't, to me, it doesn't really give a lot of information, whereas gynocentrism does, and it also explains why women like it. Because it's not for a lot of women, not me in particular, because I before I was really into men's rights and understanding these issues, I never really understood why when guys did this, it just felt ugh, yuck. But for a lot of women, they like the feeling of being centered. They like the feeling of being coddled, being treated like a queen, being treated by something special and fragile and delicate, but also very valuable. And this is what's seductive about what feminists call benevolent sexism. And until you recognize what's seductive to women about it, you can't really challenge it. Like I was saying to Habib during the Friday side chat where we were talking about, and so TealDeer knows, Habib was a women's rights activist in Saudi Arabia who was arrested for teaching them to drive. But he also found that, a lot of women opposed the driving, and men as well, but also men were supporting the motivation to equality, or to try to get equality for women in Saudi Arabia. And I said to him, if you don't recognize why women, if you don't acknowledge that most of the resistance to women driving in Saudi Arabia is from women, and try to figure out why, you're not going to get anywhere in creating that equality. And and for feminists, now that we have these freedoms, if feminists don't, I don't know, grow up or just expand their ability to think about things and understand that it isn't oppression and anger and hatred towards women that suckers women into a loss of freedom, that it's rather the invitation to feel special and valued and protected. That's where it comes from. And you got to figure out how to convince women that, hey, no, that's actually, it's better to be independent. It's better to be to have these freedoms, and it may not be something you can convince women of. I don't know. Like I think I'm the kind of person that even if it's impossible, I feel like I need to try.
Well, here's the thing, right? It's very easy to convince women that they want these things, the independence, economic independence, freedom, and all of those things, as long as they still get to keep the benefits of gynocentrism, in terms of their safety and a safety net provisioning and all those things, right? One thing I did want to mention that Habib actually laughed pretty hard in the little chat, and I don't think it made it on air, but I said, in Saudi Arabia, the burqa is essentially just women's way of saying my eyes are up here, asshole. And it really is, sort of when you think about a lot of this sort of, and a lot of these things like the burqa is mostly enforced by other women, and a lot of it really has to do with feeling special, having a specific designation, a specific sort of thing that you wear that signifies that, people aren't supposed to look at you, they're not supposed to leer at you, they're not supposed to touch you, they're not supposed to insult you, they're not supposed to jostle you, they're not supposed to come into any kind of physical contact with you, they're not supposed to yell at you, they're not supposed to blah, blah, blah. They're supposed to respect you in a very specific way, right? And what women in the West don't seem to understand is that when you want to be treated equally, it precludes the idea of special treatment, and you can't sort of have this half thing. It's not sustainable to have this these half measures where, you know, you get equal rights and you get equal freedoms and you get equal choices and you get equal wherewithal and you get equal power, right? But you get extra help and you get extra support and you get extra protection and you get extra provisioning and you get extra consideration and you get extra gentleness and you get extra this and that and the other thing, right? Women want both of those sets of things, right? They want as much of one as they can get of the first one without having to give up any of the rest of it.
And I want to invite TealDeer to comment or say anything that he feels like he needs to. Disagree if you want with the stuff that we've brought up.
Well, no, because what Karen just said is basically what I said earlier, that this is the thing that women seem to have this... it's coming down to how sort of biological is this behavior, and this is the thing I know that causes all the butt hurt in people. Like, oh no, how can you possibly say that women's preference for how men treat them is in any way biologically informed? Because, you know, people who will suddenly use this the science that will demonstrate this will suddenly turn into the most social constructionist people you've ever seen as soon as you mention the idea that, you know, a woman's choice in how men treat them might also be informed by something similar. You know, I think Karen put it very nicely on one of the videos around that, you know, the reason you can't talk about gynocentrism is because of gynocentrism.
First rule of gynocentrism: don't talk.
Yeah, don't talk about it. Yeah, exactly right. It was one of those points that sort of really hit home on this. You know, if women throughout all of history, and I'm talking like since before humans were even human, had a preference for mates that could provision them with the best resources, because human beings are pseudo-tournament in their nature. They're not a strict tournament species. You know, if you look at strict tournament species, you see males killing each other without even blinking. You know.
Well, and you see single mothers everywhere. You every mother is a single mother. There is no such thing as fatherly provisioning of offspring and mate. That just doesn't happen. You get the occasional tit for tat exchange of like food for sex. That's about it.
Yeah. That's why humans were a kind of tournament, but not really, because humans still have that. They still have all the necessary social work going on under the hood that enables them to actually cooperate far more than any other animal. But there is still a pseudo-tournament behavior within that, in that men still compete with each other for resource gathering, because that resource gathering then enables resource provisioning, which then enables them more access to higher quality women, and women, as a result of being the focus of all of that desire, in essence just get to sit back and demand the best of the best from the males around them. Now, it seems really weird that if this has been the successful breeding pattern that has enabled humans to expand all around the world into every environment imaginable and be one of the most successful species we've ever seen outside of various bacteria and viruses, you know, it seems really unusual to then suggest that this behavior is not something that has somehow been genetically passed on. We know that things such as intelligence have been directly equated to people's ability to provide for themselves, people's wealth, people's income, all of that sort of stuff. We know that intelligence is about 60 to 80% hereditary, based on genetics. You know, it's not sort of that far-fetched to think that, again, this sort of attraction is genetic. And you look at other sorts of experiments that have been done around this, like there was an interesting study done about hip-to-waist ratio preference in men, and it was like, oh, well, is this whole fat acceptance thing, is it actually legit, because attraction to women is a total social construct? And obviously the quickest way of testing this, the easiest way of testing this, was to just do some simple tests with congenitally blind men who have not seen women, not seen the fashion industry, not seen magazines and movies and TV shows and all of this perfect body image stuff ever, because they've never seen anything. unsurprisingly, when they're given a tactile feedback mannequin, which is basically an adjustable woman model, like 90-something% of them gravitate to the one which has the 0.7 hip to waist ratio. You look at that and you realize that goes cross-culture, cross-ethnicity, cross-political model, cross-economic model, cross-social, cross all of these different boundaries. It's like, yeah, no, there's probably some genetic basis to this.
Yeah, it even goes.
And that's the same thing that we see with this pattern of breeding, this hypergamous pattern of women preferring men who are able to provision them, not necessarily purely monetarily, and because this is the straw man which I've had from this before. Fucking morons telling me, like, oh, you just think women are genetically programmed to be gold diggers. No, under no fucking circumstance, because when you're talking about general provisioning here, you're not only talking about monetary wealth or material possession. You do factor in other social elements, such as just general care provision, emotional provision, things like that are other factors. And again, the other famous fucking straw man from idiots on this topic, which I've had, is people saying things like, oh, so you're saying all women must... No, not at all. We're merely looking at propensity for this pattern of behavior, and propensity for this pattern of behavior exists, again, cross-culture, cross-ethnicity, cross-political boundary, cross-economic models, cross-geographical boundaries, cross-racially. It crosses, like, every single variable that you see in societies. I mean, there's been studies which have been done between China and Hong Kong, which have shown the marrying up thing. We've had studies which have been done in Africa in a non-monetary, non-capitalist system, which showed the same pattern with women preferring men who could acquire the most stuff. We've had studies like this done in America, which is the capitalist economy and whatnot. We've seen this pattern emerging. I mean, even just in those three examples, you've seen it across a communist state, a capitalist state, and a non-monetary, non-capitalist, non-communist state, which is more like a sort of feudal state. It exists everywhere. So the idea that you can sort of look at this pattern and say, so this women being provisioned with everything and wanting the best guy to do this. Oh no, it's totally socially constructionist. It's all like a convergent evolution of society. There's no possible way that it could be genetic, right? No, it pretty much is at this point. It's just a case of working out exactly how much to which. But the idea that you can just say, no, it's socially constructionist and just a convergent evolution across the economic model. It's coincidence, guys. Honest, no, that's an absurdity at this point.
Can I just want to get in before the Karen train rolls out of the station. Just get into and point some stuff out about terminology. Hypergamy, if you think, let's just use the feminist term of benevolent sexism. Benevolent hypergamy comes right out of the term benevolent sexism. Because the reason why benevolent sexism is attractive to women is that they are feeling protected. In order to feel protected, you need someone to do the protecting. And if the person doing the protecting necessarily has to feel more powerful than you are. So hypergamy comes right out of benevolent sexism, right out of feminists' own theories. It's the feeling of being protected by someone more powerful. And you can't have benevolent sexism without hypergamy. Sorry, feminists, it's the logical conclusion of benevolent sexism. And the other thing I wanted to clarify is someone in chat was talking about individual free will. Well, we can say, for example, to use a less charged example, that fat and salt and sugar is something that we instinctually crave in our diet. And but that doesn't excuse overindulging in it to the point where we have an obesity epidemic. When we say that we have these instinctual desires, these instinctual compulsions, that doesn't excuse them. It doesn't excuse their excessive exercise to the point where we're destabilizing a society. So in recognizing we have these instincts and that they have a biological basis, it does not follow that we are excusing them or excusing individual will and the necessity to be aware of your instincts and not succumb to them if they're destructive. And I'll hand the floor to Karen.
I did want to say too, right? with the blind men in that study on waist to hip ratio, I mean that would have also not just played out against across different socioeconomic classes and cultures and the whole bit. It would also have played out across weight categories. So if you literally have a mannequin that is a 300-pound woman, the equivalent, and one of them has that waist to hip ratio, she's going to be the most attractive of those 300-pound women. It's not just about skinny. It really is about that ratio. When it comes to hypergamy too, and this is one of the reasons that I am 100% certain, other than even setting aside all of the reasons why it would be that make perfect sense, that have no moral judgments attached to them, that one of the reasons why I'm one of the sort of a piece of confirming evidence that it is a biological predisposition on the part of women is that when you as women gain more economic independence, right? So as women climb the socioeconomic ladder as single women, right? So they, as income bracket goes up as a single woman, hypergamy actually increases. You would expect, if it was socially constructed and if it was all to do with women feeling dependent on men, based on their circumstances and all of this, and so of course, you're a poor woman, you want to marry somebody who's better off than you because then you don't have to worry about money so much, whatever, right? But when you actually find that in the lower socioeconomic sphere, right, the working class people, hypergamy is much, at least financial hypergamy, is much less of a consideration for women. They're much more likely to be looking at somebody who just has a steady job, whether he earns more than them or not, who's a solid guy, who is just going to be a good teammate, I guess, right? And has certain masculine qualities that she might admire, right? As women climb up the economic ladder, right, on their own, so you have now a doctor, right? A female doctor is much less likely to date down or marry down than a woman who works at Tim Hortons is, right? Absolutely 100%. She is looking at now. She's not looking at sharing. She has plenty of resources. She's a millionaire woman. She has plenty of resources to go around, right? She is not looking to share her resources with a man. She wants him to be able to participate in the lifestyle to which she has become accustomed. So she wants him to be able to attend all the same parties and to have his own tuxedo, which he dry cleans instead of rents, and all of this other stuff, and move in all of the same circles and be able to afford to travel with her to exotic destinations and all of that stuff. She wants him to be able to share in her life. She does not want to finance that, right? She wants him to be able to finance his own participation in her lifestyle and then some, right? She wants him, it's much more important to a wealthy woman to marry somebody who is wealthier than she is, has more resources than she does, right, than a working class woman, right? So this is where you sort of see it, that it's almost like the more room there is for this shit to express itself, the more a woman feels like she doesn't necessarily need to get married because she's got plenty of money and and all of this, and she does not have to compromise her hypergamous instincts in terms of settling for somebody that she can actually secure as a mate, right? Whereas a woman who works in Tim Hortons, she'd be willing to go for the guy who works at the car wash because, he's solid, he has a job, and she could really do with, living with a guy who has money. They can double their resources, right? So essentially, because these things tend to play out, same thing with the gender equality paradox in Sweden when it comes to gender segregation in the workforce. What seems to be the case is that when you remove environmental pressures and you remove economic pressures and you remove political pressures and legal pressures from people, everything's just free and everybody can essentially choose to do what they want to do. All that's left to express is the biological component of it. That's the deciding factor now, right? So once you have a situation where a man where a woman can be with a man or not, right, and still be financially just fine, right? It removes a huge amount of pressure, and what happens? Her hypergamy actually expresses more than less, rather than less.
Go ahead, TealDeer. I noticed you turned your mic off, or your mute off. So go ahead.
No, that was actually just because I was typing and I have a super fucking loud keyboard because I've got blue switches. So yeah.
Oh, okay. So you didn't want to say something.
Well, I will now. As always, we have the people in the chat giving us the whole so love means nothing at all. Like people can't be in relationships for. Did I not mention this straw man argument a little bit earlier, where it's like, no, people can still do things for emotional reasons. This pattern of hypergamous behavior, this wanting to focus and give things on women, doesn't have to be a purely financial gain. It doesn't have to be purely material. Material wealth and provision of resources is a component of it, certainly, but it doesn't have to be the only one. I find it hilarious that you can address this and then only a few minutes later people are still going to bring it up. They'll still bring up the whole, but my free will, my emotions, my love. It's like, we're talking about propensity for a behavior.
Ask yourselves, okay? Now, free will, right? Which essentially means I'm going to decide how I feel. I am going to be in control of how I feel. Now let's talk about one of the most primal drives of any sexually reproducing species, right? Which is the drive of
hamburger.
The drive of sexual attraction. Okay. Now we have this fat acceptance movement, right? Or let's just say, okay, but now we have the pill, and most people don't even want to have kids, or most people only want to have a couple, and so I mean, like, okay, does this mean that people don't feel like they want to have sex? I mean, consciously, if you don't want to have kids, right, you shouldn't feel sexual desire anymore, because, you know, none of it's instinctive, right? And on top of that, if you decide that you don't want to have kids, you never want to have kids, you're a guy, you never, ever, ever want to have kids, well, who should be, rationally, logically, the most attractive woman out there for you? A postmenopausal woman, right? And you wouldn't care if she's 500 pounds. You wouldn't care if she looks like Throw Mama from the Train. You would not care because, you know, all of those beauty standards, all of those sort of universals, youth and a healthy weight and clean, clear skin and symmetrical features and that waist-to-hip ratio and healthy, full hair and all of those things that men universally find attractive, right, in women, right? Well, I mean, you're not planning on reproducing with her, and the only reason men find those things attractive is because, you know, that woman there, that perfect woman, she's a safe bet to reproduce. Well, you don't need to reproduce, so you should be able to talk yourself in to being sexually attracted to Trigglypuff. No problem. Absolutely no problem. Right? And you should also be able to talk yourself into loving her personality. Right?
That's the harder bit, I think.
Because, yeah, no, there's nothing about a certain personality or temperament on the part of women that men find attractive. right? There's nothing about a certain female behaviors that men find sexually appealing just on a biological level. Yeah, no, 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 no. No, that it doesn't exist, right? So, if your dick can get it up watching that gif of Trigglypuff, then you can talk about these airy-fairy woo notions of love, cosmic, fuck, all of this other shit. But I don't think you can. I don't think your dick is going to be able to come through for you.
Oh my. That's okay. Go ahead, Mike.
I haven't said anything for a while. I don't know if I'm going back on what we were saying or if I'm adding something all new. Humans have a sort of control area between tournament species and pair bonders. As we established earlier, it would be wrong to say all women are instinctively hypergamous, sort of in tournament mode, and it would be just as wrong to say all women are instinctively monogamous pair bonders. But evidently both are possible in a way that looks pretty wired up. Maybe that's evidence that we've evolved from one to the other. It's rare, but it happens, especially after environmental change, and humans have gone through a great deal of that. So to say we're wired to do one thing is a nonsense in itself. We're wired with the kind of software that can do either thing. It operates on a spectrum between monogamous pair bonding and hypergamous tournament. Both men and women are instinctively wired to go in either direction depending on what happens, you might say. On the larger scale, this is the same predicament. You can't blame anyone for being hypergamous or monogamous. But you can blame anyone who forces one model on other people, anyone who demands, especially on a large scale, that everyone else conforms to like a tournament model. It's to be heavily scrutinized. And if it looks like your government is pushing a tournament model, then have a word with your government. If you have rolling citadels of tower blocks full of single mothers, that would be a symptom of overindulgence of the tournament model, which we might have been coerced into. There would also be symptoms of overindulging in the pair bonding model. The whole 1950s two-up, two-down nuclear family thing, perhaps. There are ways of abusing both of these extremes. And like what Alison said earlier about sugar and salt and fat. There's extreme ways of abusing one kind of food. There's extreme ways of abusing another kind of food, and I guess we haven't really educated people on the sex pyramid, or to what degree you are what you eat, or whatever.
Okay, I wanted to just point something out about the tournament versus monogamy model. There is actually, and I know everybody's going to groan because I'm going to bring up wolves, but a female wolf will preferentially try to mate with the highest status male wolf that she can, for the simple fact that if she's not high status, she's not going to breed. So there's an element of very much an element of hierarchical status even among presumably monogamous species, especially when you're dealing with a monogamous species where there's a lot of alloparenting, so multiple adults participate in raising the young.
I was actually going to say that too. The marmosets, other monogamous species, the difference that humans have, that exists in humans, is it's not that status doesn't matter in monogamous species. It's that there really are no social species that live in groups that are considered to be pair bonders or monogamous.
Well, there are breeding colonies like birds, but I take
but we're talking mammals here. Let's keep things close.
No. I mean, there's another way of looking at it too. A breeding colony between pair bonders, there's no between pair bonding bird group A and B, there's no exchange of resources. Whereas with humans, in our tribal societies, everybody is really looking out for everyone, helping them build their nests, helping them get large game and share it, and helping them get rare resources and sharing it. So it's not the same as a breeding colony.
Yeah. And so, but essentially what you end up having with most pair bonding mammals is that live in groups, is that only the highest status couple are the reproducers, and they aggressively police all the other members to prevent them from mating, because they want to monopolize the investment of every member of the group in their own offspring, right? Human societies are they are different in, and this goes even in polygynous societies, like societies that allow one man to marry multiple women, or even to monopolize lots and lots of women. The majority of the matings are monogamous. The mating is essentially what's considered to be egalitarian, which means everybody who can manage to convince somebody to mate, to pair up, is sort of free to do so, for the most part. And so what you end up with, and I think that this particular model is probably one of the reasons why, because if you actually look at intelligence tests that they've done on chimpanzees and bonobos, now chimpanzees are more technologically advanced than bonobos are. They've started to use they use more compound tools and tools that have 2 or 3 parts. So they use a tool to build another tool out of multiple parts, and so they have a higher level of technology. They've increased their territory, they've maintained their numbers, all of those things, and they're actually more cooperative with each other, even though there is more conflict. Just day to day, they are capable of more complex forms of cooperation with each other than bonobos, right? But bonobos tend to do much better on intelligence tests than chimpanzees, and one of the reasons that they figure that this is the case, because they actually think that bonobos are not more intelligent than chimpanzees. They think that bonobos do better because chimpanzees can't keep their eyes off their neighbor's fucking paper, essentially. They are too consumed with observing, right, with the competitive instinct of observing how well the others are doing, and they get distracted, they don't pay attention, they don't stay on task, right? Now, a lot of that has to do, that difference, right, the bonobos being so relaxed and just being able to sit and take their test, and the chimpanzees being way too interested in what the others are doing than what they should be doing, is basically sexual competition, right? Bonobos are relaxed because everybody's fucking having sex, right? Chimpanzees, not so much, right? Now, when you actually look at how we diverge from these two systems, where almost everybody's having sex, right? Just like bonobos, but they're paired up, right? And it essentially dampens that competitiveness between males and allows greater, more complex forms of cooperation to come out, because it's not like you have essentially a bunch of alphas on top and then a bunch of guys underneath resenting them, right, and trying to plot their downfall and all of this other shit that goes on in chimpanzee society, because that's what you have to do in order to get sex, move up the ladder, and finally get access to sex. There's this dampening of the competition. There's still competition, but it's not quite as in your face. And I think that because of this model, this is why our males are so capable of cooperating with other males who are not even related to them, right? Not even related at all, and have managed to, and then you're investing in your own kids, right? In bonobo society, who the fuck knows whose kids are whose? Nobody invests, right? All the mothers in bonobo society are single mothers too, right? We have individual male investment in the offspring that he believes are his, at least, and we don't have so much competition between men, like this petty competition in terms of trying to find sexual opportunities, because everybody is afforded a chance for that. And I think this is one of the things that's really made us unique and successful.
Almost everybody, anyway. But because if you have polygamy, if you allow some form of polygamy, even in polygamous societies, most relationships are monogamous. But if you allow that, then some men are going to be out in the cold. They may not care. I don't know. But no, I see what you're saying though, because
there's an argument though that polygamy occurs, when you have massive male die-offs. That it becomes more popular when there are just more women than there are men.
Okay, well, I mean, and I take what you're meaning, because I think what you're getting at is that because the chimpanzees are constantly in this heightened state of like competition, in particular sexual competition, and the bonobos aren't, the chimpanzees score lower. But because with the human system it's a pair bonding system, so when it's working right, everybody who really wants to can have have a partner and produce children. The competition lowers, which allows for an even more greater sense of cooperation than even among chimpanzees. So I get what you're saying. I think that we've really moved far afield from gynocentrism, though. So maybe we could...
Not really, because the breeding pattern that is used here is the thing that inevitably causes the gynocentrism. It's the fact that ultimately what this comes down to is the breeding pattern. The breeding pattern that was most successful was this pseudo-tournament, men provisioning the women, and this became the sort of default go-to behavior. So this is the thing which informs the gynocentrism, and then from the actual standpoint of being a gynocentric species, that is then the thing that informs the whole patriarchy, benevolent sexism, malevolent sexism nonsense. That's just words that we've ascribed to the observable phenomenon that comes from this root.
Well, I agree to a point, but I do also want to say that there are some corollaries in bonobo and chimpanzee societies to the way things work in our societies. In terms of the types of cooperation that males and females engage in forming intrasexual coalitions, right? So when females cooperate with each other versus when males cooperate with each other. And when you actually look at how those things play out in bonobo and chimpanzee societies, what you see when females form coalitions with each other is they are enforcing, as Habib put it, they're acting as the minister of the interior, right? They are enforcing proper social behavior on other members of the in-group. They are taking their day out on individuals, right? And when they do that, when they actually, doesn't matter whether they're targeting a male or a female, and keep in mind too, all of the males are related to each other, none of the females are related to each other, or very few of them are. So when you have a gang of females and they all just like chase down a male that pissed one of them off, and they pin him down and sit on his chest and chew his fingers off one by one, okay? All of the males, they just sit around looking really uncomfortable, and just with this look on their faces like, fuck, I'm glad that's not me, okay? Now, you don't ever see when males form coalitions with each other. You don't ever see them ever pulling that on the females in their group, as individual females or groups of females. They don't do that, right? You see temporary coalitions forming sometimes to do sort of like a bloody coup, right? Depose a dominant male from his position, and then everybody in the coalition moves up a notch on the hierarchy, right? But most of the time, the male coalitions form to look outward at, so they're dealing with predators, or they're dealing with outgroups, or they're dealing with border patrols, or they're dealing with hunting, right? They're dealing with things, so female coalitions look inward, and male coalitions look outward, right? So even in chimpanzee and bonobo society, you have this sort of circle of males looking outward, and then a circle of a center, a core of females all looking inward, and that they exercise their power in exactly these directions. that the males exercise it outward for the most part, or inward on other males, and the females just aim it all inward on males, females, anyone who pisses them off, right? And that seems to be very, very similar to how things work here in human society. So.
Okay, I just wanted to. Oh, I think I had my thing on while I was. All right. I just wanted to actually go back to and maybe move on to maybe some of the psychological stuff behind gynocentrism, which might inform how we can ultimately when we talk about this stuff, we're not passing judgment morally. I mean, we can talk about how we have an instinct to eat salt and we have an instinct to eat fat, but that's not productive in the world today because we have way too much of those things. And right now we're dealing with a situation where gynocentrism isn't kept in check because we have these massively wealthy, peaceful societies where we can essentially afford to give women so much freedom, it starts to impact even the structure and the functioning of our own societies. And by freedom, I don't mean equal freedom to men. I mean more freedom, and then force the government, or the government will take responsibility for the consequences, or make men take responsibility for the consequences of women's own choices in that freedom. And what I wanted to do is maybe get into some of the psychology behind that, behind gynocentrism. And like I said, when we point this out, doesn't mean that we're saying that it's moral. It's just what we, or at least some of the people on the panelists feel are instinctive positions. Doesn't mean that they're positions that should be indulged or even considered some ways of opposing them, to reduce their excesses, to curb the obesity epidemic, or to curb the gynocentrism epidemic. You know, that's I think where a lot of the people on the panel are coming from. I don't know. Maybe you could chime in if you agree, but
you wouldn't know. Like you can't deal with the problem and correct the problem if you refuse to identify where it comes from. And however much of this is biological, and I suspect a great deal of it is biological, and then it gets reinforced or restricted through cultural and environmental factors and constraints that happen through scarcity and war and things like that, right? But the whole point of having these discussions is not to say this is a biological problem and that's the end of it, and that's it, we're done. Okay, let's call it a day. We can't do anything about it. No, it's essentially if like feminism has made a diagnosis, right? And it's essentially looked at a big blot of skin cancer and it's been like, oh, that's just a hive, and so it's gonna like put a band-aid and some polysporin on it, and then it's not gonna look at it again until it's metastasized and taken over the entire body. Right? The whole point is to diagnose the problem so that we can think of ways of arming people. When you tell people that salt and fat, right, and refined sugars are, okay in moderation, but the only reason you crave them is because your instincts are telling you to do that, and it's not healthy for you. And you should really be aware of that and be aware of the fact that your instincts are telling you to do things that aren't good for you, right? And that aren't good for society, not good for your health, right? It's to arm people with the information that they need in order to make more rational decisions about things, right? If women are engaging in hypergamous behavior in ways that are, really unhealthy, like, I don't know, you could even say that group
going after gangsters.
Yeah, groupies of
that's pretty unhealthy.
Who go
and the other thing is that
yeah.
And the other thing is that I mean, they've gotten into the state of hypergamy where they think this vision of Mr. Big or the super alpha is better than is just having the vision, just having being open to that guy just sauntering into your life is better than simply finding happiness with a guy who just is a normal guy. And it's not healthy for you. I mean, we are pair bonders, we are very social, and to be honest, putting yourself to sleep at night with the visions of Mr. Big, somehow popping into your life, rather than being able to compromise with an actual human being, ain't doing you any favors.
Yeah, it's possible that gynocentrism is intrinsically linked to growth, but it can be equally said that if that's the case, then feminism is cancer.
Okay,
It's
so the
absolutely.
golden the Golden King 20 says, but a normal guy won't make them happy. Well, yeah, but neither will Mr. Big. Mr. Big's not gonna. No guy is gonna make a woman makes herself happy. And a guy can make her happier, can fulfill your desires for company and companionship, but a man's not gonna make you happy.
Well,
And that's part of the unhealthy aspects of hypergamy for women, is that it invites women to believe that men are going to make them happy, and they're inevitably disappointed because it's not men, it's them.
well, it's not just that, right? Because I mean, like when you sort of look at if all I watched on TV all day was, keeping up with the Kardashians and soap operas where, everybody's a CEO or an executive and they wear suits every day and, they wear like, hundreds of thousands of dollars of jewelry to just hang around the house and they live in big mansions and, and oh, even though they're powerful executives, they can just take 2 hours off in the afternoon to come home and drink some 100-year-old scotch on ice and discuss what's wrong with Becky and and all of this other shit, right? Okay, now if I thought that was how everybody else was living and that life was something that was actually achievable for me, right? I would be deeply, deeply dissatisfied with what I have, right? If I thought that was just like average shit, right? Just as everybody else lives that way, right? Now, when you actually look at what the situation is now for women, right, is they've been told you can be anything, you can do anything, you can have anything. And not only that, I mean, you can do it all while banging a guy who looks like Ryan Gosling, right? Because these are the only guys that you're being shown, right? And it's giving them an unrealistic picture of their options, right? And one of the most interesting things that experiments that I read, and I think it might have been Alison who drew my attention to this, like ages and ages ago, was they had this experiment where they gave people they gave the subjects
Artwork.
artwork, a painting or whatever.
You want me to describe it, or?
Yes.
Okay, so what they did is they had a series of, I believe. What they did is they gave them cameras and they took a bunch of pictures, and then they asked them to decide which pictures were their favorite, and they would choose like 3 or 4, and then the researchers in one group, they would say, okay, you get your top pick, but you can't exchange it at the end of the week. That's it, you're done. You get your top pick. And then they asked them about their satisfaction with the picture, and they were highly satisfied. And then the second group, they gave them the option of taking the picture, or taking whichever picture they liked best, a print of that picture. But if they weren't satisfied with it in a week, that they could exchange it for another picture. And they followed up with satisfaction surveys at the beginning of this and in a week after. The ones who were basically told, okay, you get one picture, that's it, you're done. Their satisfaction with their picture increased from when they took it to the week after, when they were polled about their satisfaction. The ones who had the option of exchanging the picture, their satisfaction decreased. So they were actually objectively less happy with their choice because they knew they could change it. So they started to have second guess themselves and have regrets, and be not as satisfied with their choice. So in some cases, getting more choice means you're less happy. Sometimes you just have to make a choice and just stick with it, and just make your decision and just say, you know what, I'm gonna deal with whatever things I don't like about this picture. But I'm enjoying the fact that there are things that I do like about this picture.
I think that would apply to how marriage seems to have changed. since no-fault divorce came in, because it used to be, and any idiot feminist who tells you, oh, women didn't have an equal right to divorce, no, they did. They absolutely did. Men had just as hard a time, just as difficult a time of convincing a judge to actually sign off on a divorce as a woman did, all the way up to no-fault divorce. Now, no-fault divorce brought in a massive influx of, and it wasn't all about no-fault divorce, but it essentially, what you ended up with was women who were able, who felt that they had that option, right? They could change their mind. And once you realize you can change your mind, then you start second-guessing yourself, and then you're looking at that photo and you're picking out all of its flaws, and you're like, oh, I wish I'd gotten the lighting a little bit different, and maybe there's just something better out there. Well, for women who don't have the same costs associated with divorce, so they get to keep their children, and they get to keep a significant amount of income. They get to be paid by their ex-husbands almost as if they were still married, and all of these things, right? When you tell them you can keep all of that, or you can keep a significant portion of that, right? But you can also get something even better. You can shop around and you can find something even better, right, than what you have now. Then you're going to start looking at what you have now and being dissatisfied with it. It's just not good enough. I could have something better. I could have something different. And I wouldn't even have to give up all of the benefits and perks of having what I have now. I could hang on to them, right? And so I think that, we've constructed an environment, right? A legal environment, a social environment, a political environment, a technological environment that has incentivized women on this kind of, it's like a cycle of dissatisfaction, right? Where they never actually feel like they're stuck with any decision that they've made, right? And so they always are looking to see if there's something better out there, and usually they find something that looks better or seems better, at least until they have it.
Yeah, and so you just put the women on this merry-go-round of dissatisfaction, which is not healthy, because generally when you get divorced, unless you're getting divorced for very, very specific concrete reasons, you're not going to be better off. And you're going to end up with approximately the same guy that you married, except now he's probably going to be divorced and paying another woman. So it's like it's not worth it. But we get this. We give women this because of this out of control hypergamy and gynocentrism. We present women with options that really aren't options. It's like all the sugar water. I mean, a Coke versus Pepsi, is that really a choice? No, it's just sugar water. So and this illusion of options is it really doesn't benefit women. It only benefits the people who make money off of divorce. And so it's like when you're looking at this and you're saying, hey, let's challenge gynocentrism, and let's challenge the attendant hypergamy that comes out of gynocentrism, and let's challenge the idea of women being dissatisfied with the choices that they make in their life, and giving them multiple choices upon choices upon choices. Like, I mean, if you look at the science of choice itself can become a form of slavery and dissatisfaction and encourage unhappiness. I know that's a conclusion most people are like, oh my God. But the thing is that people should have real choices in their lives. But then these illusions of choice should, this whole edifice of companies and governments giving women the illusion that guy 2 is going to be that much different than guy 1 is like giving the illusion that Coke is going to be that much different than Pepsi. And that illusion benefits nobody, not the woman, certainly not the man, certainly not the children. It doesn't benefit anybody but the lawyers and the government who are creating the illusion. Just like Coke and Pepsi are creating the illusion like there's a difference because the competition benefits them in terms of sales. So it's like don't legally take women's choices away or men's choices, not that they have as many, but present the issues in such a way that they understand that they're being frickin' hoodwinked.
I think
And they're being used.
I think we can all step away from this discussion with the ironclad conclusion that people should just be drinking Mountain Dew.
Yes, exactly. And I wanted to get into more like of the psychology and some of the ways that feminism, like, but maybe this has gone long enough on this topic. We could maybe do another one, or.
I wanted to see what happened if I said Dr. Pepper sucks.
Ugh. Should we end on the sugar water argument?
I completely agree. Dr. Pepper.
Dr. Pepper does.
Where
suck.
are you at, TealDeer? That was my cue. I was trolling you. Fucking defend the pepper.
Dr. Pepper is the superior beverage out of those other choices. If you say anything otherwise, you are objectively wrong.
Now we've got an argument.
I like Vimto, actually.
Actually, I would much rather drink extra spicy Clamato juice, but then I'm weird.
Although it always bothered me that Vimto anagrams to vomit. I don't. It's a British drink, you know.
Oh, I've never heard of it. Vimto.
Yeah.
Vimto is delicious.
Yeah, it is fucking delicious. But do you guys want to try? Because this is a huge subject matter, and I still think there are aspects. Like, I didn't even get to all of my research that I've done on the more psychological aspects. But the problem is that I'm not feeling well, and I don't know how much more I can sustain this.
Well, I don't know. What does TealDeer, does Mike, do you guys have anything to add to any of the stuff we've...
I was just here to throw in the occasional small thing, and I did.
Would you like to come back, TealDeer, and we'll do a gynocentrism too? The recentrism?
Yeah, I could do, but I mean, you want to look at the psychology behind it. Ultimately, the psychology is the stuff that we've already discussed. It is the propensity for men to want to provision women. It is the propensity for women to want to be provisioned, and how via some very simple mechanisms of sociobiology, society has come to reflect that basic biological underpinning to greater or lesser degrees, and how no matter how you build societies, they all still are basically built out of the same fundamental parts, just in different ratios, which is why these sorts of patterns are observable cross-culture, cross-ethnicity, cross-politics, cross-economics, da-da-da-da-da. That is the psychology behind it. I mean, otherwise, all you're basically doing is looking at the sort of objective manifestations of this kind of behavior, which we've done to varying degrees,
Well,
I think, throughout.
The approach that I'm doing with the psychology, which we may not like, I don't have time, but we can actually induce a form of gynocentrism that isn't at all related to gender, and we have in the past, and between two groups that have nothing to do with, are not separated by gender. And I would like to argue, like, if we can see how we've been able to basically induce an artificial gynocentrism between two groups that are not defined by gender, it might inform how we can approach a solution of maybe curbing our out of control, craving for gynocentrism and fats and sugars, and developing a way of dealing with those kinds of things. So that's the approach that I wanted to take, but it's like an hour and over.
So you're talking about how we can artificially induce in-group and out-group preference.
Well, how we can artificially, and the mechanism by which we do that. And it's not just in-group and out-group preference. It is a situation where you're inducing in one group the desire to defend and protect and be controlled by the vulnerabilities of another. And
well,
you can,
gynocentrism is in-group, out-group. It's the female in-group preference and the male out-group preference.
Yeah, but here's the thing: is that in-group and out-group preferences, like so many ways that we tend to compare these things, and we have the sort of just replace man and woman with black and white, or Jew and German or Aryan or whatever, and you can instantly see how wrong a lot of statements are, how bigoted they are, and all of that. But in-group, out-group preferences are, they don't, when when it comes to the gender ones, they do not operate on the same psychological mechanism as they do with things like race, ethnicity, politics, sports teams, rooting for a sports team, all of those things, right? All of those things are tribalistic, and in-group, out-group gender preference is a completely different thing. And so, I mean, like, I hate using the words in-group, out-group, because I think it's we have a temptation to simplify them to sort of that tribalistic mechanism where it really is sort of an in-group preference versus an out versus another group's own in-group preference. Men actually have an out-group preference by gender. It's a very, very unique thing, and so I don't even know what you would call it other than sexism. It's just very strange.
Well, in my case, I believe that there are social structures that can enforce and create this as a very parallel situation as we see with natural gynocentrism. And my interest is to examine those social structures to see if we can reverse engineer some kind of it's not a situation where you're like forcing it on people, but just saying, hey, these are your instincts. Your instincts are probably not helping you in this world. Here's a way that we could maybe oppose them, give you the tools to recondition yourself to be more happy and healthy in an environment that we have right now. That's the ultimate goal. Is that if you're grossly overweight, wouldn't you be happier being able to control your urges to eat sugar and fat, or sugar and salt? It's really sugar and carbs. Wouldn't you be happier being able to control that and go down to a healthier weight and enjoy the health benefits, the benefits of mobility, the benefits of social, in many ways, social respectability, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Wouldn't that be preferable? Wouldn't it be preferable if you are suffering from a toxic dose of gynocentrism, if you're just suffering from those instincts, wouldn't it be preferable to give you a suit of tools to maybe oppose them and say, hey, well, I can improve my life by not being slavishly addicted to these instincts and the indulgence in them. And it's not a situation where you're like, oh, let's legislate this or let's put it in.
Uh-oh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Well,
we lost
that's the
Alison.
end of that.
Should I continue it for her? People should. We need food groups, like I was saying earlier.
What, did you guys lose me?
We did about 10 seconds ago. For
Oh, okay.
5
People
seconds.
should.
No, I'm saying that we don't present these issues like we're gonna put them in. We're gonna sneak them through the gate, put them in academia. It's like just create a suite of tools for how you manage your instincts. I mean, in terms of fat, cravings for fat and carbs, maybe you have to learn to just not eat that many carbs, and that's a tool.
Well, I think
to be able to maintain your health. And it's the same thing.
I think there's a lot to be said about that. I mean, like, if you look at people who are fiscally responsible, financially responsible, who save, who look after, who pay their credit cards down to zero every month, who don't overspend, who do those things. There is an instinctive mechanism. Gad Saad built an entire field around it, of sort of the evolutionary psychology of consumption, right? And there are reasons why the current environment, the easy availability of credit, which, I mean, has never really been readily available to people. Like a $12,000 credit limit on a Visa card that you could use at any time, right? At any store, that didn't exist even 30 years ago. I mean, like, when I was a teenager, when I was in high school, the bank actually operated on bankers' hours, which was Monday to Friday, 10 to 3, and on Saturdays they were open till 6. There was no debit card. There were, it was really difficult to get a credit card. And if you wanted money for the week, you had to either go at lunchtime or you had to go in Friday afternoon and stand in the big long lineup and withdraw cash, right? That's how you had to do things. And so your money was harder to get to, and impulse buying was not quite as easy a thing to do. And when you look at sort of the mechanism of that impulse to buy, that impulse to consume, it's essentially back, from the days when it was feast or famine. And so when there was a big spread on the table, you glutted yourself because, you couldn't be guaranteed to be able to eat tomorrow or even the day after. You didn't know whether you were going to have enough, in a week, right? So you just consume as much, you just stuff yourself when the food's available, especially if it's going to go bad, right? Before maybe before you can eat it all, right? And you don't want it to go to waste. And so essentially what you have is this set of impulses in terms of consumption that were developed back in the days before credit, in the days before, being able to spend money that you don't have. And now what we have, the famine doesn't ever arrive until you're so deep in debt, there's no getting out, and you have to declare bankruptcy. You lose your house, you lose your car, you lose everything you own, right? Arming people with the understanding of how important it is to control those impulses, to just buy something because you like it. And I mean, like, if you ever watch a show, it's got Gail Vos Oxley, I believe, Oxlade on it. I think her name is Gail. She did a show called Till Debt Do Us Part, right, about families in extreme financial trouble. And, I mean, she'd go through these closets. These people have a 5-year-old daughter, and she's going through the kid's closet and finding dresses with the tags still on from when this kid was 2, like 30 fucking dresses that have never been worn from when this kid was 2, and the wife is just like, I just saw them and I wanted to have them. It was so cute. It was just so great. They were so beautiful, right? And I just had to buy it. Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, somebody in the chat, let's see, monster in your bed, because we're sexually dimorphic and so biologically programmed. Well, we're also biologically programmed to have an unbelievable compulsion to eat sugars and carbs. Like, this shit is addictive as hell. So what you're saying is because we have that biological compulsion, we can't do anything about it. Oh, obesity epidemics, we're all basically going to be 300 pounds. So in 10 years, you, Tef monster in your bed, better get used to and appreciate a 300-pound woman, because that's going to be the average size. Let's just throw up our hands. Oh my God, it's biological. What can we do? Well, no, I don't see it that way. I see it as a challenge, and we figure out how to make the tools to match that challenge. We figure out how to build the goddamn mountaineering tools to climb the mountain. We don't just sit there and say, oh yeah, well, the mountain's like a mountain, and what can we do? No, we challenge it.
Geological determinism.
Yeah, human beings are nothing if not good at fixing a challenge. And to my mind, gynocentrism is just another challenge. And believe me, the instincts regarding fat and sugar, or not even fat, but just sugar and carbs, much deeper even than our sexual instincts. Because believe me, if you're starving, you don't give a shit about sex. First and primary instinct in you is to survive, is to feed and survive. So if you think that we can't challenge those instincts, yeah, sure, I guess we can't challenge the sexual instincts either. But if you think that, yeah, people should take responsibility and not turn themselves into rascal, those so fat they need a scooter to go around, then you can't simultaneously say, yeah, you need to be able to control instincts that are so much more, that are actually more primal than our sexual instincts. You need to be able to control them and prevent the obesity epidemic, and then turn around and say, no, we can't control our sexual instincts. We can't control the behaviors of gynocentrism. It's not possible.
I keep getting reminded of this sort of oh, who was it? Was it Thomas Sowell who wrote the book A Conflict of Visions? He essentially said that the difference between progressives and conservatives is a difference in their envisioning of humanity, right? And so you have progressives who sort of, they see human beings as maybe not entirely the noble savage, but corrupted by society rather than and corruptible by society. So they start off good, they start off innocent. Any parent of a child knows that this is not the case, right? You actually have to teach your children
They're
morality.
psychotic little fucks.
Oh, they are. They're so fucking psycho. I swear to God, if they will lie like rugs, they will, if they do some shit, right? And you're like, all right, who did this? And they will point to the other kid, right? Oh, he did it, and let him hang, right? If they can get away with it, even if they did it, and they know they did it, right? Like, kids are horrible sociopaths. But, okay, so essentially you have this idea on the left that if people are left alone, if people are made as free as possible, and all of their constraints are gone, and all of this, so there's no more slut shaming, and there's no more this, there's no more that, there's anything goes, and people will behave morally and responsibly and pro-socially, right? Just on their own, because it's society from the top down that causes people to behave badly toward each other, right? And causes all the evils in the world. And then on the conservative side, you have this idea that humans are base and selfish, and so you need to construct societal institutions and reinforce those societal institutions, maybe not legally every time, but at least in terms of social norms and behaviors that are encouraged and all of those things, right? To essentially squeeze people into pro-social behaviors. So when they step off the line on one side or on the other side, right? Society's there to kind of glare at them and get them behaving properly again, right? And I don't necessarily fully believe that either of these ideas is 100% correct, and I don't necessarily believe that either approach is 100% correct. But what we seem to have is this desire over the last 50 years or so to just turn everything in a free-for-all. It's free love, end slut-shaming, end this, end social shaming altogether, right? And people will just behave. In fact, they'll be nicer than they were. No, they won't, right? No, they won't. People behave abominably when they're provided, when the disincentives go away, and then, oh my goodness, maybe you even add an incentive, right? So that woman who had like 16 fucking kids by 4 different gang members, right? Who's sitting in a hotel room with her 16 fucking kids going, who the fuck's gonna pay for my kids? The government needs to pay for my kids. I don't remember if you remember that viral video, right? Okay, well, that's what happens when you let people, when you essentially, you just enable people to do whatever the fuck they feel like, right? You get shit like that, right? And there's no way if she wasn't getting money from the government, if there was nobody taking care of her first kid, she wouldn't have had the 15 more, right? Or however many it was, 8 or something like that, right? You would not have ever seen that happening, right? But we don't necessarily have to have legal disincentives or political disincentives or, extreme financial disincentives. We just need to stop rewarding bad behavior. Like, we need to just stop paying for it, right? Because what we've been doing since the war on poverty is we've been paying women to leave their husbands or boot their husbands out, right? And deprive their children of fathers. We've been doing that, right? Which means we're paying women to put their children, their sons, on a path, you know, on a pipeline, in a pipeline towards all kinds of difficulties and dysfunctions later in life, and their daughters, right? We've been paying women to do this. We've been paying them, right? All we need to do, we don't even need to shame them. Just stop fucking paying them to do it.
Yeah. Okay, I think there's an echo issue. No, it's good. Captain Stone Snake, you are grouping it all together and not accounting for individualism. Well, instincts are instincts.
Oh my God!
Response is your own.
Okay. I am going to paraphrase a friend of mine who goes by the name of Demon Spawn on Reddit, and I know Alison doesn't like him.
You always bring that up. I'm actually quite neutral.
Okay, good. Well, you don't always agree with him. I don't always agree with him.
That doesn't, like, agreeing and disagreeing does nothing to do with like, though.
You don't adore him like I do. I really, really like this guy because he is prepared to say whatever the fuck he thinks in the most brutal way he can think it. But he said, generalities exist. Insisting that there are no exceptions makes you a bigot. Insisting that everyone is an exception makes you an idiot. Okay? Generalities exist. There are outliers. There's such a thing as a bell curve. Okay? There is individual variation. But across large populations, in aggregate, these are the trends. Okay? That's just the way it is. You're going to have to live with it. And we are not going to preface every fucking sentence that we say with the, oh, and we know that this doesn't apply to each and every single woman on the planet, right? Yeah, no, we're not going to say that. But we are going to say that generally human beings have propensities to behave in certain ways when provided with certain incentives and certain disincentives. That is the entire basis of social science research. That is, if you cannot make generalizations across populations, right? Trends, spot, you know, just patterns of behavior, then there's no point. There's no point in criminology, there's no point in social sciences, there's no point in anthropology, there's no point in any of it. Let's just stop studying it.
Yeah. Okay. And I wanted to say something to this as well. I mean, we can talk about outliers, and then we can talk about, you know, the instincts that people have. Actually, you know what, TealDeer, do you have anything to add? Like, do you want to yell at us, or like?
Well, again, this whole you're not accounting for individual. Yes, we are. I mentioned this earlier. When people bring this up, it's the thing that idiots do on the internet, where if you accidentally forget to say the word some, suddenly they'll just say, oh, you're strawmanning because you're making a generalization. No, a generalization is not a strawman argument. A generalization is an observation of propensity. Observations of propensity are very, very useful tools by which to measure everything. I mean, most things that we know about biology come from propensity. You know, we know that the average healthy human heart rate is about 70 beats a minute. That's kind of average, roughly. You can go a little bit above, you can go a little bit below. There are people who are way above, there are people who are way below. It's a bell curve. You can talk about the people way outside of it, but when like 90-something% of your population ends up around there, it's a propensity. You can say most people's heart rates is about 70 beats a minute. There's nothing wrong with that statement. It's when people bring up and this, I suppose, is again something which I've mentioned in that video where I've basically said everything which I've said here, but for some reason idiots love to give it a lot of flack because they intentionally seem to misunderstand what I'm saying. This is the point. Generalizations are fine for these sorts of things. What we're doing is taking this thing, it's becoming a sort of hyper-individualism, whereby, and I'd like to point out, this is the tactic which like feminists and social justice warriors use as well. Like, it's their favorite thing. Like, if you don't consider this one person who is the exception, then you're a bigot. Even though it's like, well, no, we're speaking in a generalization, except they go so far as to say, well, because of this one example, the generalization cannot be true and we need to do away with it, and therefore there is no generalization. Everything's a social construct and we can change it all. That's the same sort of logic that's being applied here, where you're saying, oh no, but because individualism, that means, you know, the general trend doesn't exist.
But
no, the general trend does.
All men are responsible for patriarchy, of course.
Absolutely. Of course.
I just wanted to point out that the generalization, they're okay with generalizations as long as they're ones that are consistent with their philosophies and their ideologies. But just to pull off...
The people who have a problem with generalizing women are almost always people who have no problem generalizing someone else. It's not always men, but it's...
Yeah, it is.
The only people you're not allowed to generalize in a bad way are women. You can't say women might have done a bad thing. You can say a woman might have done a bad thing. That's still allowed, I think. But the idea that women, as any even a small fraction of all women, a tiny fraction that we can still call women because it's a plural, even that's not allowed for some reason. Any plural amount of women can't have done a bad thing.
Oh, you can't even point out the differences in the patterns of escalation in domestic violence, that there tends to be a pattern that exists with women who commit domestic violence, and there tends to be a different pattern when it comes to men who commit domestic violence. You know, and there are individuals who commit domestic violence who buck the trend, right? But for the most part, women fall into one specific pattern of escalation and men into another, right? That's just the way it is. And if we are not allowed to talk about generalizations of human predispositions across broad populations, then we might as well not discuss anything.
Yeah, and what I wanted to bring up is there are generalizations based on instinctual profiles, based on probably you know, like how we evolved in our sex roles, whatever. There may I think there's an aspect of sociality, that socialism or socialization that we can explore, but that might be for another day. But there are the biological generalizations that you can make about male and female behavior. And then, as Demon Spawn said, they're the outliers, and and in those outliers are the ones who have recognized the existence of these instincts, and said to themselves, you know, maybe I don't need to. Maybe indulging, eating all of the carbs I can stomach without vomiting is not the way to conduct my life. Maybe I need to be careful about what I eat and make sure that I'm not, you know, getting these blood sugar spikes that make me even hungrier later on, et cetera, et cetera. People who've actually recognized their instincts and said, I need to take responsibility to manage these instincts. I've been giving them, and you know, that fuck Mother Nature, she's a bitch. But despite the fact that I have these instincts, I can still manage them as an individual and make individual choices about how I am going to deal with them. And I wanted to talk about. Somebody wanted to speak up?
I just wanted to say too, right? One of the most interesting things that I noticed, because my grandmother used to say this. She said this to my mother, and she said it to me, and my mother used to say it to me, right? When I was in the most cunty mood as a kid, just absolutely fucking miserable, there was nothing on the planet that would make me happy. Okay? They would say, here's what I want you to do. I want you to smile and pretend to be happy for 20 minutes. Fake it until you make it, okay? And here's the thing. That actually works. There's proof. There's a feedback loop in your brain that makes that work. That when your brain detects that your facial muscles are in a smiling configuration, right? And you don't really have a reason to be mad or be upset or be angry, that your brain will actually be like, I'm pretty sure that we're happy, and we'll start releasing happy hormones and go into a happy configuration, right? And so, I mean, it's not like we don't have some conscious control over what we're feeling, right? It really isn't like we don't have conscious control over it. But you know, when you're miserable for no good reason or for no rational reason, right, and you can talk yourself out of it like that, then that's what we need to give people the tools to do, especially if acting on their impulses, acting on their emotion of the moment would be inevitably harmful to them in the long term.
And I just wanted to say something about, like, and there's that, and I think it also works when you have a legitimate reason to be miserable too. But I wanted to say something about outliers and gynocentrism. And women, I think in many cases I would say the Honey Badger Radio is probably outliers in terms of challenging our own gynocentrism. And I know that I'm not going to say that I am somebody who's like, oh, I was born free of original sin. I have to challenge it. I have to say to myself, you know what? You chose them, and that's good enough. And it's not and not in a way that, you know, like you're resigned, but that you look at it in terms of being grateful for what you have. And and I wanted to say, like, I may be an outlier, but when I look at my life, and I'm going to use an example that I had an experience. It was a few years ago, but I was interestingly enough, I went to Fort Mac to present a proposal. Like we were. I'm an environmental design student, or I was, and we created a urban renewal or urban update proposal for Fort Mac. And I went there to present it, and it was a flight, and I was with another woman from my group. We did the presentation. It was a great presentation, and we had to sleep in the same room because we didn't have enough money to get two separate rooms. And I remember that when I was going to sleep, or I was getting ready to go to sleep, I had my cell phone, and I called my husband, and we talked a bit, and of course I missed him because it was a few-day trip. And I remember ending that conversation, and I was like, I love you, and I miss you. And the amount of, because this other woman, just to step back, because I'm the outlier, I'm the one who's going to challenge my gynocentrism head on and say, this is the man I chose him, that's it. The other woman was a single woman, and from talking to her, she did suffer the gynocentrism urge, and she was older than me, and she had cats. After I said to my husband, I love you, I miss you, she got so fucking bitchy and bitter. Oof. Sorry, that's a compressor.
Just keep with your story. It's all right. We can tolerate it.
Yeah, it's really loud. I apologize to everybody listening. That's my compressor. It turned on because my husband probably used it for some air, or just does that periodically. Usually when I'm doing a radio show for some goddamn reason, it's like quiet for 12 hours, and then as soon as I start the radio show, up goes the compressor. So, but anyway, from talking to her, I knew a little bit more about her life. She was the kind of woman who was just never satisfied, who was leaving her life open for Mr. Big to waltz in, even though she wasn't particularly attractive, and she wasn't neither personality nor looks. And she basically lived with cats. Now, again, I'm the outlier. I'm the one who challenges my gynocentrism, just walks right into the horns of that instinctual thing. And even though I may not be with Mr. Big as other women would define him, I'm with the guy that's for me. I'm with my guy. And when I said that, oh, thank fuck. Oh, thank God. But when I said, even though this may not be a guy that other women want, when I said, you know, I love you, I miss you, she was so pissed. And you could tell she was pissed. It wasn't a situation where she got, you know, she was, you could tell she was deflecting how pissed she was onto some other aspect of yelling at or complaining about something I had done. And it was like, you know, that is so fucking transparent. You don't like your life because gynocentrism has ruined it. And I'm the kind of person who has said, no, I don't want to be. I'm perfectly happy being with this guy, even though he may not be the you know, like the alpha male from a fucking romance novel, or Mr. Big from whatever, that stupid Sex in the City.
Or perfect in every way, or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy with this guy. This is my guy. And at the end of the day, I am going to fight my gynocentrism to stay with him, if I have to. And I will. And at the end of the day, I get to say, I love you and I miss you. Who the fuck do you get to say you love and miss? Your cats? Like, and that's the thing. I'm an outlier. But in being an outlier, I am happier than 95% of women. There are women who don't even like their partners. Perfectly fine men, but they don't like their partners because of whatever reason, but they don't get a divorce because it's not socially acceptable. That's like 50% of the relationships that remain are women who were probably not very happy with their partners. Because they just can't deal, they cannot control their urges for gynocentrism or hypergamy. And they're miserable because of it.
Oh, and
yeah, go ahead, Karen.
What gets me too is that they have done studies of people who sort of go to couples counseling at the sort of the breakdown of the marriage, and some of them decide that they're going to divorce, and some of them decide that they're going to stick it out, and then they went and they interviewed the women after 5 years, right? And the ones who decided to stick it out said that they were happier. They rated their happiness as much higher on average than the ones who decided to cash in their chips and freaking skedaddle, right? So, I mean, it really is, I think, to explain to women that not every emotion that you're feeling in this moment is actually going to be of service to you long term, right? That whatever you're looking at doing, whether it's cheating on your husband or leaving him or whatever, or marrying this Christian Grey type or just banging the quarterback, whatever it is that your emotions and your instincts are telling you right now, that very, very intensely often, right? Those emotions may be fucking you over, right? They may not be, in the long run, the decision that will bring you the most happiness, right? And so you just need to actually be aware of where those instincts come from, what underpins them, right? And ask yourself, right? Is making this decision actually going to make my life better, right? Is waiting a week before I decide to fuck that guy going to make my life any worse? Probably not. But it might get me to the point where I'm sure that fucking that guy is going to make my life better.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody wants to pull in here. But it's like I said, yeah, maybe I am an outlier. Maybe me and Karen and Anna are outliers, and we're willing to wrestle the gynocentrism beast in ourselves. But maybe that also makes us happier than 95% of women.
I don't know. I'm pretty miserable, actually.
Yeah, but you're a Scorpio. Oh my God! Oh my God! The woo! The woo!
The woo! Yeah,
oh,
no. But as much as I don't agree with astrology, Scorpio does really seem to fit my personality. So.
Yeah, and Sagittarius, except for the fucking obsessive worrying about stupid shit, does fit my personality.
No, did you know most Sagittarians die by murder?
Oh.
Because people find them just absolutely insufferable.
Okay.
I put on a coffee mug, and I had to buy it for my sister, who's a Sagittarius. So.
All right. No, I can see that. I think I'm pretty insufferable. So, but yeah, it's like like I said, you can challenge gynocentrism, or you can have your life suck immensely because of it. And I'm saying this to women. There you go. Then not all instincts need to be indulged.
I do want to say too, because I mentioned this in the chat. Maybe this sort of this. When you say, dog, shut the fuck up. When you say, like that, this is your guy, and you're going to be happy with him, damn it. It was your choice, and you're sticking with it, and you're going to make the best of it, and all of these things, and you're lucky to have him, which I'm sure all of those things are true, and you don't really even need to talk yourself into them or anything like that. But it's just something that you sort of, I think that, reminding yourself, right, how lucky you are. Reminding yourself, like, that things are actually pretty good on a regular basis, right? The guy I'm with isn't perfect. The children I have aren't perfect, but they're pretty good, right? The house I have isn't perfect, but, you know, it'll do. Maybe this is why saying grace and, you know, so those nightly prayers, I'm grateful for my mom, I'm grateful for my dad, I'm grateful for blah, 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 right? Maybe that's why those rituals seem to be common in so many different religions, is sort of a daily reminder of, you know, the things in your life that, you know, that you should be happy about. I mean, not everything's perfect, but there are things in your life that, you know, you should feel grateful for having, or you should feel appreciative of having, and reminding yourself every day of that kind of thing brings it to mind all the time. And I think maybe those rituals exist within those religions in order to actually bring about this exact sort of philosophy that, you know, things aren't perfect, but they're, you know, they could be worse. They're not bad, right?
They're not bad. No, and like I said, you can either challenge gynocentrism if you're a woman listening, and I mean, think about how these instincts have made your life miserable. You're constantly second guessing your choices, constantly feeling dissatisfied, and ask yourself, maybe the solution isn't to indulge them, but to control them and to meet them head on.
Probably be a lot nicer for your husband or your boyfriend too.
Yeah, no doubt. But I think we've come to a natural conclusion, unless Mike and the deer wants to saddle in there and have some.
I believe I'm
thoughts.
spent.
You're spent.
Well, just sat here listening to two women like talk, and then like him and TealDeer have inserted themselves a little bit, but I don't know.
Just the tip.
That is our biological role as men, to insert ourselves into the women. We have fulfilled our purpose. High five, Mike.
I mean, you're a deer and I'm a panda, and they're both honey badgers. But for the purposes of this conversation, we'll pretend we're all humans. High five.
High five. So you guys don't have any final thoughts before I conclude this? Because I think
I do have one final thought, harkening back to all the free will people, and I'd like to point out that this concept of free will and individualism that bandies around as this whole, oh, you can't generalize because my outliers, basically. The possibility of being an outlier and making a choice that goes against those deeper ingrained instincts is also a faculty of your biology anyway. It's something that is intrinsic to being a human. It's like, you know that you're hungry, you walk into a shop, you know that you could just grab the closest thing to you and eat it. That is a faculty of your biology telling you, I'm hungry, I need to eat something right now. There is a different faculty of your biology in your brain that allows you to think ahead into the future and realize that, no, if I do this, this action will have consequences, that action is not acceptable, I must therefore do the opposite of my initial urge. That is also something that you have as part of the biology of your behavior. The fact that you can do that is an evolved faculty that people have. So because of that, you can go against pretty much anything. It's just how you end up doing it.
No, it's not against biological determinism to have discipline. I mean, this is what discipline is for. Not just martial arts, but all kinds of arts and all kinds of sciences.
Well, and morality.
It's part of your biology. It's not going against your biology. It's part of it.
Yeah, morality. There's a mechanism in the human brain for morality, just as there is for language. Like our capacity for language is entirely biological. So is our capacity for morality, and we're not the only species out there that has something like morality and a sense of justice and all of those things. So it really is about allowing certain parts of what is biologically there to take precedence over other parts, and that I think is what makes us particularly special, is because we can actually have a certain level of complexity there that other species don't have. So
I mean, we have the instincts. That's biology, regardless if you want to say that everything is biology. I mean, I'm going to draw a distinction between the social structures that control the instincts, and that promote discipline. Um, and basically, it's pulling off of what Karen said. Our instincts can make us very amoral, and destructive, and then we have society helping us control that and develop like a superstructure in which we can create the most happiness for ourselves and others. And I would say that that's where the socialization may come in, to control and to manage your instincts. But I think we're good. I would invite anyone who's been enjoying this and wants to see it continue, these kinds of conversations, more nuanced, I would say, than the typical. Not so much about the politics and the culture war and everybody fighting each other, but looking at the underlying things underneath that, and seeing if we can find some common ground with maybe some other streams of thought, and figure out what this is, what these meat containers that we occupy, what they do, and how we can best manage them, I suppose. So yeah, and if you enjoy these conversations, please consider becoming a patron, www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. If you have any comments or suggestions, or you have your own opinion and point of view on these issues, you can send those to topic@badgerpod.com, or you can put them in the comments. I can't promise that I'll look at them in the comments, but if you do take the time to write an email and send it to topic@badgerpod.com, I read all of them, and I filter them into the various folders. And you may end up on a show, or your topic, if you have a topic suggestion, it may end up being a show. And yeah, so do those things, and that will be awesome. Okay, let's say goodnight.